Thank you once again for for a meeting with me, and it really means a lot to me because this book, well, I read it like 3 times, and you can see that the pages has seen a lot in my work, and it's really wonderful. And well, I was wondering that because at the beginning you mentioned that you felt ageism and acknowledged it as ageism when you were playing hockey for the first time. And since then, do you think that what happened? Like, did you just woke up next day and figured out that you want to write a book about it? What was their artistic process?
Yeah, it wasn't that fast. It was a slow drip. I mean, what happened was I was at a hockey tournament playing well, scored an amazing goal, was walking on air, and then I was told suddenly that I was the oldest player at the tournament, which I knew I was one of the oldest. I'm not stupid, right? But just somehow being the oldest for some reason completely shook me. And I thought, oh no, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe people are laughing at me. Maybe I should take up a age appropriate pastime like bingo. And it was just so strange to feel that my chronological age suddenly had taken on this terrible power to limit my choices and define what I could do. And I thought it was at the tournament, I was thinking, wow, why do I feel this way? This is crazy. There must be a different way of thinking about aging. And so I came home from the tournament and the idea was playing in the back of my mind for quite a long time before I decided to write the book. So because I'm quite a slow thinker and a slow writer, and I need to feel that I've had this personal epiphany and this moment of existential crisis, but I need to feel the bigger culture. I need to notice similar things, hear similar stories. And then I began to feel over time, yes, someone needs to write this book like this right now, and that has to be me.
Well, so I'm very glad that you did. And once you acknowledged that ageism exists, did you find yourself like suddenly bombarded with, oh, that's ageism, and oh, that's ageism as well, or not really?
No, absolutely. And I think that's what happens when anyone wakes up to any kind of ism, whether it's sexism or racism. Once you finally become aware that it exists and that it's around you, you start seeing examples everywhere. And that was the first thing I noticed when I started thinking about ageism. It wasn't even a word that I used in my vocabulary, ageism. I don't know. I just didn't really, I probably thought about it. I certainly didn't use the word. And then suddenly I was noticing examples everywhere, from the media to advertising, to the workplace, to the language people use in everyday life, and in my own attitudes, right? So yeah, it was a kind of wake call, and I started noticing it everywhere.
And since that tournament, do you think that, do you still notice it that much ageism, or do you think anything has improved, or just you kind of stopped bothering, or how is it like now?
You mean personally for me?
Yeah.
Or in the world? Personally for
both.
me? Oh,
you can do both, and
oh,
would be great.
Sure. Well, from a personal point of view, it has changed 180 degrees because I used to, after that moment, I realized that I was ageist, right? I was a terribly ageist. I had a dark, downbeat, grim view of aging. I didn't want to think about it. I felt ashamed of being older. And I kind of pushed all those thoughts to one side. And then when I confronted them and began investigating what aging really is, and discovering that there are many upsides, that it's not a story always of decline and loss, and many things stay the same and many get better, then it completely changed my attitude. And it's funny, I definitely felt ashamed of my getting older before. I totally did, I have to admit it. And I don't feel that now. I really don't. I was actually thinking that for all of my hockey playing life, I've worn the number 10 on my jersey, my shirt. And I was actually thinking for the next tournament after lockdown, I might put my age on there, or I might put 50 plus or something, just as a kind of little nod to the fact that I'm here, I'm playing well, I'm a captain of the best team in the country, right? I don't have to be ashamed of what matters is that I'm able to play, I'm having fun, and here I am. That's what matters, and that's a total shift for me. So for me, 180-degree shift. The rest of the world, not so much, right? I mean, I think that in the 4 years since I had my epiphany at the hockey tournament to today, some things have gotten better, definitely. I mean, there's much more discussion of ageism in the press, in social media. Many companies now are taking more steps to make their workplaces more diverse and more open and more friendly and welcome to older people. There's a lot of rethinking about advertising and the depiction and portrayal of older people in advertising. There's many things that are happening. I think with the pandemic as well, forcing people to stay home. Many older people have got more comfortable with technology now in a way they perhaps wouldn't have before. And that's helped change attitudes around learning in later life and whether older people can do technology. Of course they can. It's ridiculous to think they can't. You don't need to be a genius to use an iPhone. You don't. Anyone can do it, right? I mean, I look at my mother who's nearly 80 and she is an absolute crack with her iPad. She's better with it than my daughter who's a teenager. So I think that things have moved, but not 180 degrees. We are still a deeply ageist culture.
But do you see a light in the tunnel for us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I do. I feel like for one reason, things are already changing. And for another reason, the world is changing in ways that mean that ageism has to disappear. It can't continue because demographically, we're getting older as a planet every day. Every day, there are more older people in the world. And it's harder to denigrate and dismiss a growing chunk of the population, especially when that chunk of the population are taking life by the scruff of the neck, right? They're going out and launching businesses and running marathons and having amazing sex relationships and, making documentaries and fighting climate change, becoming teachers, changing careers. They're doing all this amazing stuff. And they're also telling us about it on social media. So you go on social media now and it's full of images of people doing, extraordinary things in their 50s, 60s, 70s. So the whole image and impression that we get now in the culture about what aging looks like has changed. And so that's the first step. So you see different possibilities, you see different role models. That's step one. Step two is people acting to follow those role models. And I think more and more is going to happen. It's going to happen faster and faster. And I think that over time, we're going to put ageism in its box.
Well, let's hope for that. But I was wondering that you mentioned many role models of social media, but sometimes, especially in Poland, when you watch the news, at the end there is like a funny story, to cheer up the public, and many stations mention like older people, like a 90-year-old grandma that rocks at the gym. So do you think that depiction of a person is ageist, but if she did it herself, that wouldn't be ageist? Or is there a difference between that?
It's complicated. I think there's a danger that sometimes just holding up an example of someone doing something extraordinary in later life and saying, oh, look, it's partly the way you say it. If you hold it up as a kind of extraordinary freak event and almost not laugh at it, but turn it into entertainment, then I think that's ageist. I think it's not ageist if you just simply, next time you're filming a segment in a gym for the news and there's someone of 90 years old, make sure she's in the background. You don't have to interview her. But what I think a lot of TV crews will do is they'll go to a gym to interview somebody about the pandemic, right? The owner of the gym is being interviewed and you see people in the gym. They see an old person, they move the camera so that there's a young, beautiful girl on the gym, right? And you don't, and I think that's where the ageism, right? That's where, and I think you just have to have older people or people of all ages doing everything at every age in a way that is unremarkable, not presenting it as some crazy, weird event that we should either laugh at or be entertained at, or, just normalize it. I think that's what we want. We want to normalize these things. And if you put it at the end of the news the way you're describing it there, I think sometimes it's the opposite of normalizing it. It's kind of worsening the ageism probably.
So do you think that we should act when such things happen on media? Like, should we text the media head that, well, hey, that's ageism, we shouldn't do that? Or not?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's important to speak out, definitely. I don't feel that people should become obsessive and we don't want a Twitter mob every time someone does something that's ageist. I mean, we don't want to turn it into a kind of bullying movement, right? But I do think that, from time to time, it's important just to say, hang on, have you actually thought about how you portrayed that older person or the language you used? Is that, that didn't sit well with me. How does that going to land with you? Just asking the question and getting editors, marketing agents, people who are controlling the visual wallpaper and the language we see around us, getting those people just to pause and think a little, think for 30 seconds about what image they're portraying of age. And that can make a huge difference. So you don't have to become like a bully pit, like a bully or anything. Just gently reminding people that that they have a responsibility to tell a different story, right? Yeah. Tell the truth, right? Not a different story, tell the truth, rather than telling this awful lie that we're always being told, which is, that growing older sucks.
Yeah. But they can make a great change in the world by just telling the truth, like you say. But you also mentioned the pandemic, and I once wrote a quote by, well, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name well, but it was Houellebecq, probably, like the author of some books.
French, yeah, Michel Houellebecq, yeah.
Yes, and he mentioned that the pandemic showed us that the lives of older people are generally perceived as more worthless than the lives of young people by the statistics. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was just, like 100 people died of COVID. They were all sick and old. But if one person who was young died, there was suddenly a movement and just panic. So, and also the vaccine distribution. And I don't know if you heard of the senior hours in shops in Poland. Well, do you think that pandemic somehow emphasizes ageism?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has had a mixed effect. I think in some ways it's fortified the idea that growing older makes you fragile, weaker, more susceptible to disease, which in some cases is true. In many ways, I mean, statistically, as you get past a certain age, you're more likely, I mean, just physically, we're just not as robust, right? So in a way, it's shining a light on something that is already true. The problem, I think, is the portrayal of it, right? That it's sort of saying all old people are one thing, or all people who are 65 are this. Everybody who's 75 is that. Some people at 75 are stuck in a nursing home, sitting in a wheelchair. Other 75-year-olds are climbing Kilimanjaro, right? So there's a huge range within the age thing. And I think the real danger of the pandemic is that it's pushed us into this very narrow way of thinking about generations or age cohorts that we think of. It's making us ageist in that sense of saying everybody who's this birth date is that. They're all that thing. We need to treat them all in the same way. And everybody who's this birth date, that age, we got to treat them all the same. And it's not true. Obviously, it's not true because we know that it's underlying health conditions, which are more likely to be a problem in later life. But, many younger people have suffered terribly from COVID and also died as well. So it's not, I think partly it's the way the story has been told that it is quite ageist. But there's another angle here, which I think is also interesting, which doesn't get much attention, but which is there have been a lot of reports coming out about, of course, how the ordeal, the trauma of lockdown and the pandemic has really harmed people's mental health, right? That's a problem all across the world. But it's interesting that the age group who is coping best with it is older people. Right. And of course, that's one of the things that you get stronger at as you get older. You get more robust emotionally. You have more tools, more levers to pull, more resilience, more strength emotionally. You're better able to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, of the downsides of life. And that's something we've seen in every disaster in human history, right? Whenever they've done research on like Hurricane Katrina in the United States or the Fukushima, all that stuff, the older people always cope better. So that's another story to tell, right? That, okay, as you're getting into those later ages, you're maybe more vulnerable physically, but mentally, the other side of that story, you're actually a lot stronger, right? You're tougher. So there's that part of the story is not being told enough, I think.
Yeah, so, well, I should emphasize it in my project, I suppose. And one thing that I was also wondering about is, now I'm lacking because when I thought about this angle, it just so many ideas now popped in my head and I got distracted. But do you think what is important in life actually to you? Like you are as Karl Honoré, what is the most important thing?
I think the most important thing to me is feeling that every day, in some small way, I am making the world a slightly better place. very simple. And it's often a very small way, right? Just saying hello to somebody in the street or helping, you know, just a very small thing. I think, and I've always felt that, but I think I feel it more now in later life. And I think that's something that also changes as we get older. There's a lot of interesting research showing that as we get into the second half of our lives, we become more interested in giving back and helping others and stuff. And that's always been an important part for me of life and happiness and what a good life is. I think it is for everybody, but it's interesting that as we get older, it becomes perhaps even more important. So I think that's how I would define happiness.
That's really nice that you mentioned like a slightly better place, and not that you just have to rush and save the world immediately, as many people now feel they need to.
Exactly. I mean, I have a save the world complex, and I'm always trying to save the world. But one thing I've learned along the way is you don't save the world overnight. You know, it's a slow process of small steps forward, then a step back, and then a step sideways, then no steps for a while, and then, you know, so it's. But as long as you're always pointing forward in the right direction, then you're on the right course. I guess another way I think about happiness as well is, if I had to define happiness in a way, for me it would be just waking up in the morning and thinking, yes, another day.
Yeah,
I think that for me, I think that's a very simple thing to have, but also a luminously beautiful one.
So do you wake up like that, being grateful?
Yeah. I have, and I have, to be honest. I'm generally a pretty optimistic person, but the work I do is important to me, and I think it helps, and I'm in a zone where I do feel that, and it's been harder during the pandemic, right? Because my work life has changed. I haven't traveled anywhere in a year. In fact, actually, weirdly, tomorrow is the anniversary of the last time I was on a plane, and I flew home from Warsaw.
Oh, really?
That was the night I was in Warsaw. I was launching the book, Boulder, the book you held up at the beginning of the interview, and Europe was closing down for the pandemic, and I got on the last plane out, and I haven't been on a plane since. So that's a year tomorrow. This is a 1-year anniversary. So in that year, I would say, especially in the last month, there've been days when it's hard to keep going, but I keep going. My chin is up.
Well, so good for you, really. I hope you get your motivation and inspiration a bit more. And also, slightly off the track now, but I was wondering, what do you think about nursing homes? And well, I don't mean people that are severely chronically diseased or people with advanced Alzheimer's, but generally like retirement villages, or just I don't know how it's called in English, but do you are you afraid of getting there? Would you do anything to, you know, not getting there? What's your mind on this?
As a general rule, I don't really like the idea of retirement villages and homes and so on. I think wherever possible, people should be carrying on living in their own home. So that obviously someone has chronic health care needs, then there's going to need to be in some kind of special care facility of some sort. But until then, I think wherever possible, people should try to carry on living in their normal community, in their normal family environment. And I think the very idea of taking a chunk of the population based on age and putting them in a ghetto, however, you know, pleasant and lovely and quiet the ghetto is, it's still a ghetto, right? Yeah. You're still cut off from the rest of the world. And I mean, the last chapter of my book is all about the importance of mixing generations. And I think that's such an important ingredient for creating not only good lives individually, but also creating a healthy society, right? So that generations can share experience and knowledge and wisdom up and down, from young to old and old to young. And also, when you bring the generations together, you break down the ageist stereotypes. So it's a good way to defeat ageism. And it just makes people happier, right? I mean, that's a whole library of research is, you know, mixing up with people of different generations, having friends, neighbors. So I feel, and I think we're starting to see this now with some forward-looking designers who are building communities, new ways of living together. And one of the main things they try to do is build neighborhoods where people of different generations will live together. So housing that maybe works for all ages, or maybe housing that works for someone who's maybe a little bit more frail, a little bit older and needing help, but next door to somebody who's having their first child, or across the street from a school. So just keeping the traditional neighborhood that human beings have always mixed the generations together until the late 20th century, when we suddenly broke off into silos. And I think I really am a big believer in bringing the generations as much as possible together. And I do think that retirement villages kind of get in the way of that. They run counter to that spirit.
But in your book, you mentioned the building, the facility that the generations were mixed, exactly. And having this ideal scenario that such a facility would be existing in many places in the world, do you think that we should stop demonizing families that decide to consider giving? Well, giving is a terrible word, but I don't have a similar word now. Their older members of the family to such facilities because they simply don't manage anymore with helping them live.
Oh, I would never demonize anyone for a decision like that. I mean, that's a terrible, painful decision for everybody involved. And there just sometimes comes a point where, more harm is being done than good by keeping someone at home. I mean, I've not gone through that. Well, I have sort of on the other side of my family a little bit, but I would certainly never sit in judgment on people's decision to do that. I would just say as a general principle that, and I think people know this, people don't need me to say it, right? That everybody is going to be better off the longer we stay together, the longer we keep people out of homes. But there's going to come a point for many people, maybe even most at the very end, that it's going to be hard to be at home. We're going to need some outside help to come in, or we're going to need to go somewhere else or something like that. So no, I certainly wouldn't want to demonize anyone for doing that. Definitely not.
Mm-hmm. Well, good that many more people would realize it. And also off the track now, but you were born in Canada and are generally described as a Canadian in the internet, but now you live in England. So I suppose that you lived in quite many places in the world. And did you notice any difference in the, not respect, but like treating older people and younger people, just intergenerational activities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely some, cultural differences. I think in sort of Southern Europe, Mediterranean countries, there's more of a tradition of the different generations maybe mixing socially in fiestas and eating together and staying up late outside and stuff. There's more of that in those countries than there is, say, in the Northern Europe and the Anglo-Saxon world. Traditionally in the Far East, aging, older people are kind of put on a pedestal and sort of looked up to and stuff. But that there is very mixed, right? Because that's a traditional official thing that people are sort of meant to show deference to older people. But actually in practice, the cult of youth, the idea that younger is better and, people don't want to grow old. I mean, there's sort of this idea that in Asia, people have so much respect for older people that everybody wants to grow old because you want to have all that respect. Nah, it's just not like that. I'll give you two examples of that prove it's not. One is in Japan. This is slightly different, but it falls into the same category. That in Japan, there are older people now, people in their 70s and 80s are committing crimes deliberately. So they're going out to shops and shoplifting to get caught. And the reason they're doing that is that they're so lonely. They've been so abandoned in their own lives that they want to go to prison to have company, right? So when a society gets to that point, that's not a society that cherishes and respects older people, right? There's something else going on. And there's very much a culture of pushing the parent, much more than there was Asian cultures, pushing the parents out of the house, wanting to live away from them and so on, and not giving them the respect and reverence of tradition. The other example is from South Korea. South Korea is now up there with Brazil as one of the countries where people spend the most money per capita on plastic surgery, okay? Cosmetic surgery. And I can guarantee you that no one in Korea is going to the surgeon hoping to come out of the surgery looking older, right? They are all going to look younger, right? So what does that tell you? That tells you that the cult of youth is pretty universal, yeah? And you find it in different expressions in different ways, but I think ageism is a chronic problem around the world. Slightly different expressions, different cultural norms around it, but the problem is a global one.
But would you call it one of the most severe problems in our world?
Yeah, I think I would. I think I would. I mean, I'm not. It's difficult to rank problems. I mean, obviously climate change is up there. I mean, racism, sexism, all the isms, right, which have never quite gone away. We've got a lot better at dealing with racism and sexism. Still have a long way to go, right? But we've come in, if you think what it was like 40 years ago to now, wow, we've made a huge difference. I mean, just think of your life compared to your grandmother's life, you know, 2 generations, that's a quantum shift in 2 generations. Ageism, we're only just starting now to tackle that, the ageist industrial complex. So, you know, this is the work of many years, and there's a long way to go. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. This is one of the biggest challenges and one of the most important problems that we face. And it's only going to get more urgent because the world is aging, right? We can't keep burying our heads in the sand. We need to confront the aging world and our toxic, outdated attitudes to aging. Otherwise, there's going to be trouble. So I think big problem. We will get it. We will get onto it, but we need to get onto it, I would say, faster than we are.
Okay, and it just raised one more of my questions. Like, do you think that the idea of making the workplace more age diverse, like as a law, that you have to employ, like, for example, at least 3 people over 55, let's say, do you think that such things are kind of helping, or it's not really the cause? Like, what do you think about the age, the retirement age, and that stuff?
Well, I think retirement age is a problematic thing. I mean, I think the whole idea of retirement is probably finished now. I mean, the old way of the first part of your life was learning, the second part was earning, and then the last part was resting. That 3-stage path doesn't make sense anymore, right? We need to throw that out and be doing all sorts of different things all the way through our lives. So learning all the way through our lives, earning, stretch out the earning. You don't have to earn all your money between 25 and 65 now, or 50, whatever, right? You know, many people, I mean, in Japan, a third of Japanese people between the ages of 70 and 74 are in the workplace, working still, right? And working well, you know? They're not there because people are just being kind to them. They have something to contribute and they're earning. So I think as we get to a point where we're aging better and living better for longer, people are going to not only need, but they're going to want to carry on earning and working and stuff. So I think that the old fixed retirement, I'm not sure how exactly we replace it or what we do with it, but it's a one-size-fits-all solution. And it comes from a world when people learned, earned, rested a little, and then died. Now people are going to live, many people who are listening to this podcast or your age are going to be living into your 90s, right? You can't be retiring and stopping working at 65. It's totally ridiculous. You wouldn't even want to do that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to have a complete revolution in the way we think about retirement and the whole shape of life and a path. The first part of your question was about, I think you were asking about quotas maybe, right? If we should say, like, I'm always a little bit uneasy about governments coming in and mandating what companies who they have to hire and how many. I think that can send the wrong message. It can create a backlash. It can lead to distortions. It can mean sometimes people are too often hiring people for their age and that's ageist, right? So I prefer for the change to come from below, like from the culture itself, from people in the workforce demanding a different approach to age, companies doing the research, running experiments, discovering that having a mixed workforce is good for them and learning themselves, and then saying, oh, hang on a minute here, this team, our best performing team, has 2 people in it over 50, one's over 60. That proves the case that the studies show already that having a mixed generation workforce makes you more creative, more productive. So we've got one team, why don't we have another? You know, I'd rather it came from that angle, from good experiences, rather than the government saying, you need one more person from that age group, right? That just sits a little uneasily with me. That doesn't work for me personally, but who knows, maybe we might have to have some version of that, but I hope it comes from the other direction, which is from us as citizens and companies and organizations waking up to the wisdom of having a wide range of ages.
Yeah, very nicely said. And what do you think about ageism towards young people? Like, do you think that younger people should have a right to vote, like not from 18, but somewhere younger, or should it depend on your social abilities?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, there is obviously ageism in the other direction. I mean, there's that idea of, you know, young people are kind of snowflakes and entitled, and they don't want to work hard, and they want to, you know, that's ridiculous. That's just the same as saying all older people are conservative, and, you know, it's just not true, right? Now, as for voting age, that's a tricky one. I mean, I definitely, I think I probably believe that 16 should be, and I don't think you should say certain socioeconomic groups. I think you've got to say everybody. I think 18 is kind of old. Maybe 17. Maybe we could try 17 and see, and then maybe aim for 16, perhaps. I mean, it's so important for everybody to be involved in the political decisions and process, and for young people especially who've got such a stake, not only in today and next year, but in the next 80 years, right? So you really want people like that to be part of the conversation and to be heard. So I would definitely welcome lowering of age for younger people and more. Well, we've sort of seen it here in Britain, where some very young people have been elected to Parliament recently. So, you know, maybe that's going to start to change a little bit now, as you know, the whole juggernaut of Silicon Valley and 21-year-old billionaires is kind of reshaping people's views of younger people and launching businesses in their teens and stuff. So that's all going to kind of help take away some of the bad stereotypes about younger people as well, right? So hopefully that will work on the ageism on the other end, right?
Yeah, let's hope so for that. And some of the last questions, are you afraid of Alzheimer's and dementia? And do you think that it's one of the problems that we should tackle alongside ageism?
I'm not personally afraid of it. I mean, whenever I think of it, I think, what a horrific nightmare thing to happen. And I don't want it to happen to me, of course, or anyone. I don't want it to happen to anyone, right? I mean, it's an awful, awful curse. And I think we should be spending way more money and investing way more time and mental bandwidth and energy and academic oomph into dealing with it. I mean, a lot of money is going into it. So hopefully we'll get better at dealing with it. And we might even find a cure, perhaps. I mean, we know that early intervention, lifestyle changes, you know, it seems that leading a healthy lifestyle, diet, keeping active, keeping engaged intellectually, cognitively, doing exercise, these things can help us avoid getting those things in later life or delay it. So I think it's important for everybody to go for that. But yeah, no, of course, it just feels in a way so random. We don't know, it's not 100% clear who gets it and why and stuff. So it is, of course, it's a scary thing. I don't want to diminish it. And anyone who has it or is living with someone who has it, you know, my heart goes out to you. It's a terrible, terrible thing to happen.
And do you think that young people, even children, do you think that we should start very early to acknowledge that we are going to be old, that that we are, you know, the time is passing, and that Alzheimer's is a possibility? Like, do you think there should be a school subject called Education Towards Old Age or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if it would be a whole subject, but I definitely think that we want to get people thinking as young as possible about life as a whole course, an entire journey, right? It's a long process of going through different chapters. It's like you're writing a whole novel with many chapters in it. And each chapter will be different, and you'll get to the end of a chapter and you'll have to transition to a new chapter. And also, when you think about yourself in the future, it changes the way you behave in the present, right? I mean, there's a lot of good research on that. And part of ageism, I mean, that's the weird thing about ageism, isn't it? That it's discrimination against your future self, because like, unlike racism or sexism, like a male chauvinist pig is very unlikely to become a woman, right? Or a white supremacist is not going to morph into a black person, right? But everyone, all ages people, everyone is going to be old if they're lucky, right? They're going to be old one day or older. So, you know, that's the peculiar, weird thing about ageism, that it's an act of self-harm in lots of different ways. So I think, how do we deal with self-harm? You know, we get people talking, we get people thinking, we get people talking to other people. And I think the earlier we start getting everyone thinking about life in that long journey, long view manner, the better we'll be, because people will make better decisions now. They'll be making decisions in terms of thinking of themselves later. They'll also treat people also older, I think they'll treat them better and think differently of them. So yeah, I sort of feel we should have a, I don't know if it's a school subject or should definitely be a theme at school. Maybe we should have every 5 years, everybody has a kind of, well, in what Britain we call an MOT, a sort of for cars, right? You go in every year and it gets tuned up, you get looked at, it tells you what's doing well, what's not, it fixes something that's slightly going wrong. And just a moment to pause and think about the last 5 years, contemplate the next 5, the next 50, and just sort of always be aware of the bigger picture. So maybe it'd be useful to have some kind of social ritual where we just every, I don't know, it could be every year, who knows, or every 5 or whatever, every 10, where we just stop and think, okay, look back, look forward, look around, and just recalibrate, reset a little bit, course correct, and then move into the next chapter.
Yeah, sounds amazing. I would take part in this even tomorrow. Like really, I would do that. Okay, but now if we switched places and I was your age and you were my age, what would you do? Like, what would you tell? If we if you were 16, what would you do, and what would you like to tell the 16-ish people?
Well, the two things I always think when I look back at myself, I would say two things. One, there's no rush. You have so much time, right? And I think that's such a marker of youth, is that feeling of, oh no, I've got to get this now. I need to get the best job. I need to find my life partner. I've maybe got to have children. I've got to get all these, I've got to get all through my travel bucket list by the time I'm 30, because life is over 30, right? Or then you get to 30 and you discover, of course, life isn't over 30. But you're thinking, well, 40, game over. Then you get to 40, you realize, now I'm 53. So now I realize that when I was 16, I was so impatient. I thought, I got to get this stuff done now. I can't wait. And you make much better decisions and enjoy your life much more when you slow down, right? When you're not constantly rushed, that deadline mode. So that would be my first bit of advice to my younger self or any younger person. The second is, this is something also that you gain, I think, with experience and age, is just not worrying about what other people think of you. I mean, that's something that I think as a young person, like as a teenager, about 20 something, we're also worried about what other people think of us, right? And that just closes doors down. It hems you in, it clips your wings. I mean, just think of all those doors left unopened and all those roads left untraveled because we thought, God, what if I fail? Or what if someone laughs at me? Or what if she doesn't like it? Or that's not as cool enough for him or something. You just think, oh, yeah, just do it. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, and the truth actually is that, well, actually, there's a really good quote from Ann Landers, the famous agony Ann in the United States, who said, at 20, we worry about what other people think of us. At 40, we stop worrying about what other people think of us. But at 60, we realize they were never thinking about us at all. Yeah. Which is so true. And so you're kind of there at 16, 17 thinking, you're all looking around thinking, well, what's that person thinking of me? They're probably not, they're worried about themselves, right? They're not thinking that much about you. So I think that was two things. You've got lots of time, don't rush. And number two, feel free, feel light. Don't tiptoe around other people's expectations and opinions. Those things don't matter. What matters is what lights you up.
Yeah. Because many times when we see somebody younger than us do something that we didn't do yet, like for example, when we see a 15-year-old winning a marathon, we tend to get so jealous that he's younger and he did it, and I'm older and I didn't do it. And I just what I observe in the society right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a probably common thing, especially since the media is always publishing, drooling portraits of, big entrepreneurs under 30, successful influencers under 25. You think, oh my God, I didn't even have an Instagram account of it, But I think that's just unhelpful, right? I mean, let's be honest. Everybody in the world, the most amazing person in the world, can look around and think, wow, that person did something better than me, and they did it 2 years before I did. Nobody wins everything and gets everything done before everybody else. It's just not possible. So whatever you look at, whatever you're judging yourself on or measuring yourself up against, there's going to be someone who's better than you at it, or who did it earlier, or who did it in a way that was made more money or whatever, But I mean, that should not stop you from doing it your way. in your time, right? That's the key thing, is do it your way, do it in your time, and let it, you know, feel good about other people rather than feeling envious, you know. Give that person a round of applause who did it in a way that maybe you couldn't, or did it for you, you know, but don't let it paralyze you, right?
Yeah. I recently heard a nice quote too, but I don't remember the author, that a candle that lights another candle doesn't burn less itself. Well, you know, I don't know if you get it. Maybe I can send it to you because the translation was now quite weird, but well, okay, so I can send you this quote later. And thank you so much for this talk. And I have so many ideas and inspiration now. And I know that I shouldn't rush, but